Welcome to Lesson 23. This is an overview of Florida laws and additional resources. We've made it into Chapter 3 in the book, and this is just going to be a quick introductory lesson covering just pages 117 and 118 in your book. So there are a variety of laws that impact the practice of pharmacy in Florida. But there are four major ones, and I have them listed in the book for you on page 117, and I did them in numerical order in the book, but actually on the slide, I'm putting them in the order of their most importance for your studying purposes. So Chapter 465 of the Florida statutes is the Florida Pharmacy Act, which obviously is very, very important. The second most important chapter would be Chapter 893 in the Florida statutes. That is the Florida Controlled Substances Act. And then there's a little bit, we're going to cover a little bit about Chapter 499, which is the Florida Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. But that should not be the focus of your studies because that chapter is really more applicable to drug manufacturers, drug wholesalers, but there are certain parts of that act that can impact the practice of pharmacy. So I'll have those covered in the book as well. And then Chapter 456 is the Health and Professions Code. This is a general chapter for all healthcare professionals, but you don't need to read that entire chapter because only portions of that chapter apply to pharmacists. While there are some provisions of that law that could impact the practice of pharmacy, and also there's grounds for discipline in that act as well, it's not something I think you really need to focus on. And there are provisions in that act that apply to, let's say, physicians or nurses or other types of healthcare practitioners, but don't apply to pharmacists. So you always have to read that act carefully to see if it references persons licensed under Chapter 465, then yes, that particular law would impact pharmacists as well. Now these are the laws that are passed by the Florida legislature that impact pharmacy practice. We also got rules that are passed by the Board of Pharmacy. Now for your purposes for the MPJ, you don't really care if something is a law or a rule, but there is a difference. As I said, the laws are passed by the legislature, the rules are passed by the Board of Pharmacy. So just in my practice when I was working full-time, what I found very interesting, I would find people coming to the Board of Pharmacy to try to get something changed, and not realizing that it's in the statute, it's in the law, and if something's in the law, the Board of Pharmacy can't change that. That requires the legislature to change it. Now, if something's in the rules, then the Board of Pharmacy can change that, but they can't change a rule that's inconsistent with the laws that they work under. All of the Florida Board of Pharmacy rules are in Chapter 64B16, and then they're divided up between different chapters 26 through 32. Now I will say the Board of Pharmacy did try to organize these rules somewhat by these subchapters 26, 27, 28 through 32, but it's not perfect. And I found myself going back and forth between different rules, and you can read through all these rules on the Board of Pharmacy's website, just going through them one at a time through each chapter. But what I found better when I was trying to organize this book was trying to put topics together. For instance, you'll see when we talk about technician duties, there are two completely different rules and completely different chapters, but they both talk about pharmacy technician duties. In addition to that, sometimes there's things in the statute as well as the rules, and you have to try to put those together. So I organized the book differently, trying to group rules that impact the same topic together and also statutes as well. And I always try to reference the particular statute or rule that I'm talking about. So if you want to go back and read the entire section, because I try to summarize things, you can do that as well. And the rules can be very detailed, and sometimes you'll see in the book I'll put the Board of Pharmacy list the following topics that need to be covered, let's say in a policy and procedure manual, and I might summarize those and I'll put in there to see the complete list, see the rule number, and I can't put every single word for word thing that's in the rules in the book. So I do try to summarize things. So I do encourage you, if you got extra time, to actually read the complete rules as we go through them. Okay, turning over to page 118, I do want to mention some additional resources that I think will be helpful to you. I think I mentioned one earlier when we were talking about Controlled Substances Act, and that is the DEA Pharmacist Manual. I do recommend that you get a copy of that and download it. Make sure it's the 2022 edition of the DEA Pharmacist Manual. On the state side, I think you need to visit the Florida Board of Pharmacy's website. And I've got the website listed for you there. It's floridasPharmacy.gov. And under the resources section, that's where you can find links to all the laws and the rules, so you can just read them online. You won't have to actually print that out. The latest news section of the board site is also helpful. You can also subscribe there to get updates by email to keep up with what's going on in your profession. And one additional thing you might want to look at is the pharmacy inspection forms from the Florida Department of Health. So one thing to realize is the inspectors that inspect pharmacies, they may be dedicated to the Board of Pharmacy, but they actually work for the Florida Department of Health, which is the overseeing agency of the Board of Pharmacy and the Board of Medicine and other healthcare professional boards. So the pharmacy inspection forms are not directly on the Board of Pharmacy's website, but if you just Google Florida Pharmacy Inspection Forms or Florida Department of Health, you can find those forms. And the reason I think they're helpful is they show you when the inspectors are coming out to pharmacies what they're looking for. And they cite different rules to make sure you're in compliance with those. And it certainly doesn't hurt to look at those, because that's telling you that the items that the board thinks is the most important, and it's possible that those things could also show up on the MPJE exam. All right, so that's the overview for this chapter, and we're going to start right in on page 118 in the next lesson, talking about prescriptive authority and scope of practice.